Today we're going to recap the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU. Phase 1. Yes, all 6 movies. If you would like to see more franchise recaps, please like this video and subscribe, and we'll produce more. Superheroes on TV sure inspire us to become one like them. What if those superheroes with their supernatural powers exist in real life? Iron Man, 2008. The beginning of the story is kind of bizarre and confusing. The middle-aged man Tony Stark, who is the protagonist of the story, is in an army car and transferred somewhere, but his car is suddenly ambushed by bombs and shelling. Stark also becomes a victim of this terrorism and again is captured by real terrorists. The story goes back a few hours when the Apogee Awards ceremony is going on. We learn Tony Stark is the honorable American patriot and son of legendary weapon developer Howard Stark. Currently, he is the CEO of a company that creates scientific and advanced weapons to protect his country. That's why the honorable award goes to Tony, but he is not there to attend this ceremony, so a bald guy takes the award in his stead and gives the reason Tony is not here because he is always working. Yeah, he is working in the bar playing some games and flirting with girls. Some dudes from the army interrupt his fun and come to take him back to his home. Right after waking up in the morning, he goes to work on his project and engineers something amazing again. His sweet assistant Pepper Potts comes to tell him the schedule of the day. He has a plane waiting for him, and before going to the plane, he needs to sign for the MIT commencement meeting that will occur in June. He is not a guy who likes the celebration of his honors and awards, but he signs the paper on his sweet assistant's request. Just as planned, he reaches the destination location and boards on his personal plane to Afghanistan. He even makes the boring environment of the plane into an entertaining one by throwing a party there. He finally arrives in Afghanistan and demonstrates his newly engineered weapon, missiles, by dropping them onto mountains. After having a busy day, he says goodbye to his mates from the site and boards the car, but it soon becomes a victim of a bombarding ambush. It's the same scene shown at the beginning. The next moment, he opens his eyes in a dark cave, with something on his chest connected with a battery of the car. He quickly tries to get up and remove the metallic thing on his chest, but a bald guy named Yinsen suggests him not to do a reckless thing. He has got shrapnel moving towards his heart, and that metallic thing is electromagnet that is preventing its movements. Suddenly, some goons barge into the room and threaten him to make a missile, as he demonstrated back there, but Tony refuses his request. They take him somewhere to torture him and warn him his life is in their hands. Then they take him outside to show they have got everything for him to engineer a missile, but again he refuses their request. Later, Yinsen makes him understand his life is on the line. He has just 1 week to do something about it. The next moment we see he agrees to their request to make a weapon and collects all the necessary equipment. They both are actually making a fool of the goons and planning to make something different from what they have requested. Basically a robot, or precisely an armor. Tony starts first by making a miniature arc reactor that produces energy in replacement of battery and prevents shrapnel from getting into his heart. They both work hard and design different parts of the iron robot using parts given for making missiles. However, those goons are not easygoing. They watch those engineers through a camera and notice the shape of the missile is somehow different from what they have ordered. That's why they smell something fishy and raid their room, where their leader, Baldy, checks their engineered part and finds out the sketch of Iron's body. Here he realizes they are deceiving and planning something devious. He threatens Yinsen and persuades him to speak about whatever they are planning, but Tony somehow makes them believe they are working on a missile. Now things get serious. Stark puts all his efforts and completes making the rest of the parts. The thing that remains is assembling those parts. Yinsen assembles the iron parts on Stark's body while working on something in the computer. Those goons notice Stark is not in the room. That's why their leader orders his men to check the room, what is going on there. When they try to open the door, the bomb attached to the door blasts out and takes their lives. It creates an emergency situation and everyone runs towards the room, but Stark and Yinsen are halfway through their plan. Yinsen plans to play as a scapegoat and runs out to stall time for something to complete on the laptop. Just when the loading is completed, all lights are blown out, creating darkness in the cave. Those goons still charge toward the room, but Stark with an iron armor comes into action. No bullet can penetrate his iron body and cause him damage. He eliminates every man who comes in his way and leaves the cave where more men are waiting for him. They fire guns from every side and he throws fire everywhere in their hideout, destroying the equipment and other important things. Amidst this confused situation, He flies into the sky just like a Power Ranger, but due to the poor quality of the iron body, the propelling system of the robot body stops working. Without having any other source of support, he free falls directly into the marshmallow desert that saves his body from breaking into pieces. Soon his fellow army tracks him down and saves him from the misery of the dry desert. He returns to his home country with his fractured body, and everyone warmly welcomes him. He meets Pepper and requests her to organize a conference for him immediately instead of taking him to the hospital. Without disobeying his orders, she organizes the conference where everyone gathers to learn what happened to him back there in Afghanistan. He starts his speech saying random things, but out of nowhere, he announces he is not going to work on making weapons anymore. Whatever happened in Afghanistan has opened his eyes that the things he is engineering are just double-edged weapons. His Obadiah turns pale, listening to his bullshit, and pulls him out of the conference, saying they are going to have an internal discussion. Stark makes him understand, and they are not doing good making something that destroys everything. Instead, they should be working on making arc reactors, even though they are outdated and can be very beneficial, but his uncle is not ready to accept this. Stark even goes to his soldier friend Rhodes and persuades him to be part of his plan, but he refuses to help him by any means. Later, we see he is replacing the arc reactor installed on his body and calls Pepper for her help. On his instructions, she removes the copper wire which is dipped into some solution in his body and reattach a new reactor to his body. She is disgusted with the jelly thing in his chest and does not want to do this thing again, but he makes her realize she is the only trustworthy person in his life who can do this. She stops complaining after listening to his emotional speech. Obadiah comes to Stark and informs him that the committee has filed an injunction against Tony, but Tony does not give a shit and goes back to his hideout. Stark continues to work on the project to make the iron body, which he started in the terrorist cave. This time he is working with the help of his robot fellows and advanced technology to build everything with precision and accuracy. After days of hard work and hit and trial, his refined armor comes to completion. He wears the armor and his robotic assistant Jarvis assesses all the features installed on his robotic armor and calibrates them according to his preference. After giving a final check, he flies his armor out of his home like a Power Ranger and roams around in the air, enjoying his new creativity. He even flies toward the moon to see how far he can go out of Earth's environment. At a certain height, ice is frozen over his armor, which disconnects his connection with Jarvis and deactivates his functioning. It seems like he is doomed without having anyone on his die to save him, but when he falls back and the frozen ice is melted, his connection with Jarvis is maintained, activating all other functions. He roams around to his fullest and comes back home in a flashy way. After learning there is still a need for improvement, he commands Jarvis to upgrade the material of the armor so he can travel to other planets as well. Here he sees the news of the red carpet organized for the Starks with an expectation Tony will not join the party considering how he is going through post-traumatic stress. Of course, it's the excuses his Obadiah has been giving to everyone. Tony does not want to miss his chance to ruin everyone's expectations. He drives his Audi and crashes the party uninvited, which surprises everyone. The playboy Tony Stark looks here and there and then sticks his eyes to the beauty Pepper, who is enjoying her party in a flashy dress. He surprises her with his sudden visit and takes her to the center for the ball dance, but she does not seem comfortable and takes him out for fresh air. She clearly tells him it's not the right thing for her to dance with him, who is the big shot person. Realizing his mistake, he goes back to buy drinks, and here he meets a girl, Christine, who shows him some pictures taken in Gulmira where his company's weapons are being used to wreak havoc. Tony is unaware of this fact and goes to his uncle to ask about whatever is going on in his back. His uncle does not tell him anything about Stark weapons used for terrorism and exposes a bitter truth. The one who filed the injunction against Tony was his own uncle. He returns from the party in anger and checks his new armor while watching the news of horror going on in Gulmira. Those bastard terrorists who captured him in Afghanistan are behind this uproar in Gulmira. He quickly wears his new armor, which is finally updated with new metal coverage to prevent ice formation, and flies toward the Gulmira, where terrorism is going on. He lands at one point and precisely eliminates the terrorist without damaging innocent people. He goes on destroying the panzers and other dangerous weapons that can jeopardize innocent people any further. After doing his work, he flies back to the sky, but his actions have been noticed by the Air Force Base in California. It causes confusion in the base. They don't know who is behind all this if no armed forces are involved in this. Rhodes gives a call to Tony to get his help without knowing he is getting help from the one he has to capture. Tony somehow dodges his questions, answers, and disconnects the call. Suddenly, two planes start pursuing him and attack him, which he manages to dodge, but he is at his limits. He gives a call to Rhodes, who thinks Tony has sent his equipment to deal with those terrorists. But Tony clarifies it's not his equipment, it's actually him in the armor. Rhodes quickly gives the order to the pilots to return to the base. Just when they accept it, one pilot sees Tony grabbing a plane, so the plane starts rolling around to shake him off. But doing all these stunts, one plane gets its wing crashed. Its pilot jumps off along with its chief to save himself. However, his parachute is still jammed, unable to open the balloon. Tony uses his full force to fly down and help the pilot to open his parachute. This way everything results in a good ending. Rhodes later does not expose the media about whatever happened in the air. However, we see another face of Obadiah. He goes to Gulmira to meet his companion, who is none other than the terrorists' leader running a rampage there. He actually had ordered this terrorist gang to gang up on Tony and take his life. It explains why there were weapons of Stark technology at the terrorism site and in pictures that Tony saw on the red carpet. The leader takes him to the room where rough-quality armor is redesigned again after collecting their parts from the desert. He is sure if dozens of these armors are made, one can rule over Asia. This Obadiah can lead Stark technology solely, and in return, he has to gift this leader a pack of iron soldiers. Both have a common enemy, Tony Stark. But Obadiah does not intend to fulfill the terrorist's wish. He jams him down in one place using the annoying weapon that paralyzes him right there, and commands his man to retrieve the armor and eliminate everyone here. While coming back, he plans to gather every engineer and work on making prototypes of armor. Pepper comes down to Tony's hideout where he is working on his suit. He assigns her the task to go and retrieve all files of the shipping manifests. He is planning to find all weapons and destroy them by himself. Pepper is hesitant to do this work as it is part of his plan that can destroy him. But if he persuades her to do it, he has been doing work that endangered everyone, and now he is working to save everyone. She accepts his requests and goes to his office to open very sensitive files that show Obadiah is up to something bad. She wants to go back quickly, but Baldy shows up in the office and talks random shit about Tony. She maintains her composure and somehow comes out taking evidence in her USB. But he gets a hunt she has done something here, so he quickly checks on the PC and finds out some files have been downloaded. He goes to his sector where engineers are working on making a prototype and learns they can't make a technology that can power up this armor. Tony Stark is at his home and receives a call from Pepper. Before he talks with her, his uncle shows up silently and paralyzes him using that annoying device. He has done this to get the miniature arc reagent that could power up his prototype. Thank God nothing happened to Pepper. She gives a call to Rhodes and tells him the Obadiah has paid those terrorists to eliminate Tony Stark, and right now Tony is in danger. So Rhodes quickly goes to Tony's home and finds out he is fine after retrieving another of his heart. He quickly wears his armor and goes to the site where Baldy has reserved his armor. Pepper and the guys from the Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement and Logistics Division, or SHIELD, have also raided that place thinking they can capture Baldy. However, they are minutes late. Obadiah appears in his armor prototype and attacks Pepper and others, and at the right time, Tony also pops up and engages in a fight with his uncle out in public. He has a plan to destroy him. He flies in the sky with his uncle following him to the point where the freezing on the armor starts. Just when Tony thinks he has knocked out his uncle, he again pops up and fights with Tony with an upper hand on him. Tony gives instructions to Pepper to overload the reactor with high voltage, so following his instructions, she fills the reactor with a voltage that discharges an overflowing current to the roof. Baldy is unaware of what's going to happen, so he takes a direct hit and knocks out on the spot. This news spreads all over America, but they hide it, saying their robotic prototype got malfunctioned and an unknown Iron Man appeared to save the public from unnecessary damage. A conference is again set up for Tony Stark to give a statement about the mysterious Iron Man, and here he loudly announces he is the Iron Man. That creates a fuss out there. Tony and Pepper have not become a couple yet. Let's see in the second season if they start dating or not. The Incredible Hulk, 2008. The story begins with a confusing experiment going on with a subject named Bruce Banner under the supervision of a young girl, Elizabeth, and an old man, Thaddeus. During the experiment, the subject turns into a monster and hits everyone in the lab. In the next moment, we see him at a hospital beside the unconscious young girl and reminiscing about their time together. That old man comes there too and kicks him out of the hospital. Since then, he has disappeared in the air, and armed forces have been searching for him. He actually has been hiding in the slums of Brazil from the military of his country. He goes under breathing training to control his anger and heart rate and works at a soda-making factory to earn his living. One day his boss calls him to fix a controller and accidentally his thumb is pricked with something that drops blood down to the soda bottles. He quickly goes down and wipes the blood placed on the surface without knowing if there is still some blood limped onto the bottle. This bottle is later filled with soda and packed with the other bottles for dispatch. After work time, he sees a Baldy harassing a cute colleague in the factory. He cannot stand it and takes her out without getting out of control in anger. He is in contact with someone who is called Mr. Blue and consults him on how to cure his sickness. Blue has sent him a flower of white petals, and Bruce makes a solution by mixing the flower's petals with his own blood to check under the microscope. His blood cells are green in color, which turns red for a second due to the flower's impact, but again turn green. After another failure, Blue asks him to send his blood sample. He will run the test and find a cure by himself. Following his instructions, this handsome guy collects his blood sample in blue and sends to an address with the name of Mr. Blue. When he is working on himself, an old man drinks a sip of soda bottle mixed with his blood and becomes a patient gamma sickness. The news of this sickness reaches the military old boss, Thaddeus Ross, who creates a hell period for Bruce. He alerts an emergency situation and commands his army to find the Englishman in Brazil. The military recruits a genius guy, Emil Blonsky, for this special mission and commands every soldier to capture the culprit by any means. Bruce receives a message from Blue that his preliminary results show a significant reduction in gamma, indicating Bruce can be cured. However, he requires more data for further processing. Well, it is impossible for Bruce to retrieve this data, as it is in his hometown. At night, he sleeps calmly in his crooked bed. Suddenly, his dog notices something is going on outside. It is the army outside that has tracked down his location. They barge into his room just to find out Bruce has escaped outside. But Bruce has come down to the sweet girl's home through the window and hides there until soldiers leave his room. When the area is cleared out, he makes his leave to outside, but those soldiers take his notice and start running after him. As the houses in Brazil are very close to each other, Bruce seems to have an advantage in running and hiding from the soldiers. Unluckily, he bumps into a Baldy who is harassing a cutie back there, and this time Baldy has his pals along with him. He wants to take revenge for both times, so they start to chase after him in those narrow streets. Without having another option, Bruce gets into the locked factory to hide, but Baldy and his fellows notice him there and finally capture him. Moreover, those military guys also pop up there. Bruce requests them to leave him, otherwise something bad will happen, but they don't follow his advice. As a result, he transforms into a green monster, Hulk, right there. After his heart rate reaches the limit of his control, he loses his temper and starts rampaging into the factory. No weapon works on him, and no one can stand against him. Taking this chance, he flees away from the factory and goes somewhere to hide. The military also loses his track. That's why they go back to America after creating a mess in the soda factory of a poor old man. While wandering in his Hulk form, Bruce has come to Mexico and transforms back to his human form. He has no relative here to live his life. That's why he roams here and there. Luckily, someone blesses him with coins, thinking he is a beggar. Poor boy uses this amount to buy some thrift clothes to wear. Now the next thing he has to do is find the data present at Culver University where the experiment was done on him, and it's the same university where his ex-girlfriend Elizabeth works as a professor. He hovers around the university and finds out she has a new boyfriend, and living with him as a good couple. He is sad to find out, but his priority is to get the data. That's why he uses different ways and infiltrates the university, only to learn the data of the experiment that happened to him has been wiped out. He quickly informs Blue about the data disappearance and learns Blue can't work further without data. On the other hand, Blonsky cannot believe it was Bruce who turned into a monster and attacked everyone. The military old man exposes a terrible secret that Hulk is the result of the experimentation done on Bruce to make him a military pawn. In other words, a super soldier. But he ran away from the palm of the military because he was a scientist, not a soldier. There is no entity in the universe that can deal with that monster. However, Blonsky is persistent in dealing with the monster as a disciplined army officer. Seeing his determination, the general takes him to the experimentation lab and injects some doses to make him a super soldier. Bruce has been living at an old man's restaurant where he used to come with Elizabeth mostly in the past. The old man knows Bruce is not a guilty person, so he is letting him live there and work on his treatment. One day Elizabeth visits his restaurant with his new boyfriend, and Bruce does not seem to know about this fact. He casually enters the restaurant and happens to make eye contact with Elizabeth. He does not intend to meet her yet, that's why he runs away in the heavy rain. However, Elizabeth does not want to miss her chance and follows him back in her car. When she clears her doubt it's Bruce in the flesh, she quickly leaves the car and embraces him without any questions. Here it happens the romantic reunion. She takes him to her house and gives him a USB that has all the data of the experiment performed on him. She had extracted it from the university before it got wiped out, and Thaddeus does not know about this fact. Bruce is spending just a night here and plans to leave the city right in the morning due to his safety problems. She does not object to his reasoning and decides to walk him to the bus station in the morning. Anyway, they sleep in different rooms to spend the night. Right in the morning, they both come out of hiding and walk to the station as if they are a couple. Their happiness fades away quickly when Bruce notices they have been surrounded by the military. He does not want to get her involved in this stuff. That's why he starts running away from her without letting them fix the target on him. He enters the university while dodging the gunfire and silently engulfs the data chip in his stomach. A single person is nothing against a group of soldiers. They find him out and trap him in the tunnel connecting two buildings. Elizabeth can't see Bruce getting hurt, so she comes in front of Thaddeus's car and requests him to cease fire. Here we learn he is the father of Elizabeth, and she did not talk for 2 years. However, he is the evil father down to his core and does not listen to her. Soldiers throw shelling in the tunnel, which persuades Bruce to turn into a Hulk. He breaks the tunnel and runs a rampage in the ground to destroy the military weapons and soldiers. Blonsky engages in a fight with him and lures him out to the middle of the ground, where 2 military wagons produce strong sound waves that hold him down at one spot. When he sees Elizabeth begging her father, he destroys those wagons and frees himself from pressure. Who knows what Blonsky guy is planning? He approaches him and triggers him by asking if this is what he has all got. Hulk kicks his butt and throws him out of his perimeter. Thaddeus senses they are in danger, so she commands everyone to fall back and find cover. Elizabeth does not go anywhere and approaches him emotionally, but a helicopter with a gun starts firing at Bruce without seeing Elizabeth might get hurt. Bruce gives her a cover and destroys the helicopter, which spreads fire everywhere. After the fire extinguishing, we see Bruce carries unconscious Elizabeth into his arms, and that old man worries now about his daughter. Now this is the chance for Hulk to flee. He takes Elizabeth along in his Hulk form and hides in the cave set up beside a running lake. When she comes to her senses, she notices Bruce is not harming her. Maybe he can recognize her in his monstrous form. Still, he is so energetic and acting like a monster, so she calms him down and makes him believe everything is okay. They come out of hiding and rent a house along with other necessary materials. They almost adopt a lifestyle like they are a couple. However, they can't stay here any longer. The whole armed forces are trying their best to track them down. That's why they can't use any items like mobile phones and credit cards either. So Elizabeth plans to sell the necklace that her mother has given to her. Bruce does not want it, but she insists that they will try their best and retrieve it again. The next thing is they have to go and meet the mysterious guy, Mr. Blue. They both go to a shop where Elizabeth keeps the shopkeeper busy while Bruce makes contact with Blue and informs him he has retrieved the data. Though they are taking steps carefully, the armed forces are still one step ahead. They notice Bruce made contact with Blue and tracked down the real identity of Mr. Blue. On the way to Mr. Blue, Elizabeth and Bruce talk about what he experiences during the monster form. He feels excruciating pain in his brain and can think about just fragments of events later. It's such a harmful power, and he desperately wants to get rid of it instead of making it his own part. Meanwhile, Thaddeus is planning something evil and allowing Blonsky to go under some treatment again. The couple finally makes it to meet Dr. Stern, who is also Mr. Blue. He can't believe the guy with immense power is right there in the flesh. He has developed an antidote that must be given when he is in Hulk form, and its amount plays an important role. If there is a minute difference in dosage, it can pay them with their lives. He takes them to the lab and fastens Bruce on a table in case he loses his control. Stern gives him an electric pulse to the brain, which triggers his Hulk formation, and Elizabeth tries to put him under control. Stern finally gives his antidote, which brings Hulk back to his human form. They talk later about what happened here. Stern comes up with the answer that when Bruce was experimented, he was given a primer that lets the cell absorb the energy and abate it. That's why he did not die due to excessive gamma radiation back there. Now they might have treated those cells permanently or suppressed that process for a while using the antidote. He tends to believe his test subjects did not survive because they did not have primer. Stern takes them to his lab where he has made a collection of the blood samples he acquired from Bruce back there. As there was a small amount of blood, Stern had to concentrate it and make more. He believes that gamma technology has so much potential and they can become immune to a lot of diseases. But Bruce is not in favor of this shit and wants him to destroy this lab, even incinerate it. It has a lot of potential for threat. While they are arguing about whether they should do it or not, the soldiers surround their building and aim at Bruce with a sniper. They finally shoot a tranquilizer at Bruce. At the same time, Blonsky and other soldiers barge into the room and manage to capture Bruce alive. They take Bruce and Elizabeth to the helicopter thinking they have got victory, but the general is forgetting he has turned another human into a monster. Blonsky is still back there and uses force on Stern to give him Hulk's blood by any means. Stern does not have any other choice but to accept his forced request. He injects Bruce's blood and provides intense electrical impulses to his brain. After this process, Blonsky turns into a huge monster and hits Stern, who is standing beside his bed. He breaks out of the building and runs a rampage in the city. Thaddeus is going back home calmly along with his daughter and culprit without knowing what's going on down there. He receives a call from the soldiers on the ground that Hulk has gone berserk in the city. This news is confusing for everyone on the plane. How come Hulk is on the ground when they have the Hulk person right in front of their eyes? Those soldiers share online views of the city where they can see another Hulk with a different shape from the known Hulk that has appeared in the city. No soldier can stand against him. That's why Bruce proposes to let him go and fight with another Hulk. Of course, Elizabeth is against it, but they have no choice. Bruce jumps from the helicopter and hits hard onto the ground. Luckily, a Hulk comes out of the hole. Both Hulks fight in with each other, and the helicopter of General also takes part in the fight and shoots at Blonsky. Blonsky plunges onto the helicopter to drag it to the ground, but Bruce does not want it to happen, so he also plunges onto Blonsky and drags him down. However, the helicopter still falls down as it hits hard to handle the weight of the two Hulks. Luckily, Thaddeus and Elizabeth have survived the helicopter crash, but they are still in danger. Blonsky carries two heavy chains and runs to end Thaddeus's life. However, Bruce does not let him move forward and uses his smash force to crumble the ground. Taking this chance, Bruce uses those chains to strangle Blonsky's head enough that he becomes unable to fight back. Now things have calmed down and soldiers surround their area. Surprisingly, the General does not let them shoot the hero Hulk. Elizabeth approaches him with crying tears, and his reaction tells everyone he is controlling his monstrous body very well. Suddenly, a helicopter showers down a light on Hulk, which means he is still a culprit in the eyes of the army. He quickly plunges onto the buildings and runs away from the incident site. Later, we see Hulk living in a hut far away from the population and practicing control of his monster form in a serene environment. He smiles and opens his eyes, brimming with green lights that indicate he might have got control over his powers. At the end of the story, Tony Stark, an Iron Man, makes his appearance at the bar where Thaddeus is, enjoying his drink. Stark reminds him there was a reason he had ordered to put an end to this super soldier program, but he still did it. He has actually come to announce he is putting a team together. Who knows what he is implying? We will get to know about it in the next sequel of a Marvel movie. Iron Man 2, 2010. The story begins with the confusing introduction of a character with long hair who lives in an old house with an old man. This old man dies at the beginning of this story, which triggers this long-haired man to engineer something amazing. For some reason, he has got blueprints of the Arc reagent, and following the design, he creates the Arc reagent, which is a ditto copy of the one Tony Stark has. After 6 months, we see Tony Stark showing off his iron armor and landing on a stage with his grandeur entry. It's the Stark Expo set up after a long time, which more looks like a concert, and he has come to kickstart this expo with his speech about peace and technology. After the speech, he meets a girl from the armed forces who invites him to appear before the Senate Armed Services Committee tomorrow morning, so he marks his presence before the Senate in the morning. He is called a hero for one half of the world and a threat for the other half. According to him, his Iron Man is a high-tech prosthesis, but the Senate is regarding his Iron Man as a weapon, and he must turn it over to the people of America. They have Justin Hammer from Hammer Industries, who is also against Tony for creating such armor and demands he hands over that armor to the government, but Tony does not give importance to his statements. They have even called Rhodes to justify Iron Man as a threat to the world. Obviously, Rhodes does not accept this fact, but they cleverly ask him to read the line of his own report that clearly says Iron Man is a threat. However, this line is stated with a different context, and those sly senates are taking advantage of just this line. They also have got hands-on pictures that shows there is work going on making copies of Iron Man, which are operational and threatening. Tony takes control of the screen and runs the videos from where these images were taken. They are the lame robots that were under making about 10 years ago. And they are completely different from his Iron Man armor. Those senators quickly turn off the screen in embarrassment. Literally, they have no face to show anymore. Tony Stark leaves the room with a great speech that he is an advocate of peace and making America secure with his technology. He checks his blood toxicity increasing at a higher rate. His robotic assistant Jarvis informs him his health condition is weakening because of the Arc reagent's element palladium, which is keeping him alive as well as taking his life silently. Pepper comes down in a bad mood and nags him for why he sold his art collection to the Boy Scouts of America. He does not care what she thinks about it and avoids her questions with reverse questions and random things. Out of nowhere, he announces he is going to make her the new CEO of the company. Although it is a very unprecedented statement for her, he might have decided it after realizing his health is declining rapidly. Here he is enjoying his peace. The guy with long hair is playing with his new creativity and planning something big in shadow. The next day, when Tony is box matching with a guy, Pepper brings a lady, her new assistant named Rushman, and works with her on paperwork for transferring the company from Tony Stark to Pepper Potts. She is such a hot lady that Tony can't take his eye off of her and Google her details, but Pepper puts him under her control and makes him sign for the papers. They celebrate the appointment of a new CEO in Europe, where every reporter has gathered to report the news. Even blonde Christine from last season is here. Justin Hammer is also there and talks with Tony that he is going to present something amazing at Stark Expo. But their conversation is interrupted by Christine, so Tony takes his leave from the table. Just when Pepper takes her eyes off Tony, she finds him on TV taking part in the race that is going on outside. As the race is broadcasting live, everyone sees the same guy with long hair appear in the middle of the racetrack, showing an exoskeleton and whips powered by arc reagents installed in his body. Tony drives his car without knowing there is a dangerous man ahead who cuts his car in half. In this emergency situation, Pepper and the guy from box fighting quickly take the Iron Man suit and drive to the place where race competition is going on. Tony Stark is an ordinary guy without the Iron Man armor and takes direct hits from the Madman. Pepper also reaches there in the car with the suit and throws it at him in a very critical situation, so he quickly wears the armor. The guys who were evacuating from the terrorist stand there to see the Iron Man in the flesh and live. He engages in a fight with the terrorist with an upper hand on him, and finally manages to take the arc reagent from his body. The army takes control of the situation and hurriedly captures him to the prison. Tony later pays a visit to him in the prison and appreciates him for the design of the exoskeleton. However, there were some defects and limitations with the design. He curiously asks how he got his hands on the blueprint of the arc reagent and learns it was Anton Vanko, this Madman's father. Madman has one purpose, which is to waver a firm belief of people on Tony and show the world Tony is not a peacekeeper as he portrays. Moreover, he also seems to know Tony's life is declining day by day due to the arc reagent. Tony does not say anything and leaves the cell. One guy in police disguise hands him over a food pallet that has a paper telling him there is a bomb mixed in, and then the same ally brings another guy who is a doppelganger of the villain. This villain guy knocks him out and blasts the prison with the bomb he got in food. Amidst this confused situation, some guys capture him and take him to a place where the guy, Justin Hammer, is. Justin Hammer has no self-dignity at all. He has freed this terrorist just because they have the same purpose, the downfall of Tony Stark. He understands the situation. There is a difference in resources between him and this villain, so he is willing to become a benefactor and provide all resources to this guy. And obviously, villain does not have any objection to this proposal and joins the party with him. Back at home, Tony Stark is opening the background of Anton Vanko, the father of the villain. He was a Soviet physicist who defected to the United States and was expelled from the country accused of spying. His son Avian was sentenced for the crime of selling Soviet-era weapon-grade plutonium to Pakistan and stayed there for 15 years. Here we learn the villain has a name, Avian. Rhodes pops up there and asks him to go upstairs. Everyone has been questioning him and demanding him to hand over all iron armors. After whatever happened yesterday, Tony was proved wrong in his statement that no one would have those armors in 20 years. So Tony makes up his mind to show himself to the public, but as soon as he gets up, he stumbles on the ground. He is running out of his reactor's battery, so Rhodes helps him stand and replace the reactor in his body. And here he notices strange marks on Tony's mark that are the signs of Tony is not all right. Even upon his questioning about his health, Tony does not tell him anything and puts him in a shadow. On the other hand, Justin Hammer takes Avian to the factory where he has designed copies of Iron Man, and it is where Avian will continue his research on the armor without running out of resources. Justin reveals to Avian that he wants him to make unique armor better than Iron Man and display them in the Stark Expo, and Avian takes him in confidence that he will be able to fulfill Hammer's wish without any problem. Tony can see the reagent is spreading poison in his body. Rushman comes to his room with medicine and applies ointment on his face. He asks her what if it's her last birthday party, how she would like to spend it, and here she gives him a ridiculous idea of enjoying his birthday as much as he can. Following her suggestion, he throws a birthday party in his villa and invites all the girls to enjoy it to his fullest. Hilariously, he joins the party wearing his Iron Man armor and shows off his powers by destroying his villa. Rhodes also comes there in a pinch situation, thinking he could persuade Tony to come out, but he finds out Tony is going crazy in his armor. Fed up from Tony's behavior, he goes down into Tony's hideout and wears one of his armors to pop up at the party. He wants to drag along Tony no matter how, but Tony is persistent and does not budge from his place. They both fire at each other with full force and destroy the villa. When Tony comes to his senses, he sees Rhodes is still wearing his armor and flies back to his airbase. Tony, as suggested, is living his life without worries and enjoying donuts in the donut. Here, a mysterious guy with an eye patch shows up and takes him to talk about something important. Tony is still drunk and in a goofy mood. However, he comes to his senses when the hot lady Rushman shows up there in a black suit. She reveals she is the S.H.I.E.L.D. Shadow, and the guy in eye patch, Director Fury, had assigned her to look into Tony after learning he is not in good health. Fury is mad at him for appointing Pepper as CEO and letting Rhodes take his suit. Suddenly, Rushman strikes Tony with an electric spark, and the marks on Tony's neck disappear miraculously. It shows they have information how to cure his sickness. They take Tony back to his home, where Fury exposes that Tony's father had left the research on arc reactors to Tony as a part of his legacy, believing Tony would achieve great things. However, the poor guy is struggling with problems of his heart. This Fury guy knows a lot about his dad because Dad was a member of the founding party of S.H.I.E.L.D. for the well-being of citizens, and Anton Vanko was the opposite of him, wanting to do everything for money. After saying all this stuff, he leaves a suitcase for Tony that contains the blueprints of reactor and some documentaries. At the same time, when Rhodes and his boss are working on the Stark armor, Hammer shows up in the airbase and finds out they have got hands on the armor. He does not show much interest in armor and displays the weapons that the Air Force had ordered. Each weapon is well organized and well made, so Rhodes plans to buy all of them. Later, Tony plays one documentary where his dad talks to Tony of the present, while standing beside a model of the city which represents his life work. He is leaving everything to his kid, with the hope he will make the future prosperous using the technology of the future. Tony goes to Stark office to apologize to Pepper, but she is fed up with his careless behavior and leaves her office without taking his apology to her account. Back there, Tony notices those models of cities are still in her office, so he packs them and takes them to his hideout. With the help of Jarvis, he creates the projection of the model and works on the Earth globe present at the center of the city. He removes the unnecessary things around the globe and expands it around him, which gives him an idea to create a new element. He uses all his technology and high-voltage equipment to design and finally create a new element that can help him live without worrying about his reactor working against his body. On the contrary, Hammer has provided everything to Avion to develop the armor suits, but he has not made at least one yet when the presentation of the weapon is right at the corner. He nags for not doing anything, and if it continues, he will be a dead meat like when he was brought here. Hammer leaves a bodyguard to watch over him, whereas he will be going to the expo. Thanks to the Air Force, he has got the Stark armor piece, which he will display today at the expo without begging Avion. Just when Hammer leaves the place, Avion knocks out those bodyguards and gives a call to Tony, saying he will take revenge on the Stark family by doing exactly the same thing as they had done with his father. With the help of Jarvis, Tony quickly tracks down Avion is hiding at the place of Hammer. Tony takes this chance to use his newly designed element and flies towards the expo. At Expo, Hammer proudly displays the armor he has designed for all three armed forces, and Rhodes is at the center wearing the suit he stole from Stark. The ironic thing is Hammer is announcing he has engineered his battle suit piece. In the middle of his presentation, Iron Man makes his heroic entry and informs Rhodes that Avion is alive and working with Hammer. When Tony goes to Hammer asking where Avion is, armors point their gun at Iron Man. Of course, it's Avion controlling all these pieces through background software and control. Tony flies outside of the building with Rhodes following him automatically and firing at him. The other armor also moves well with Avion's control and comes out of the building to throw fires at the public. Pepper and Rushman corners Hammer at a point and persuade him to tell who the real culprit is behind all this fuss. Without having any choice, Hammer confesses it's Avion doing all this while living in his facility, so Pepper gives a call to higher authorities, and Rushman rushes to Hammer Industry. Rushman faces several workers one by one in the industry. However, she is a trained Catwoman with an agile body that gives her an upper hand on everyone. She enters the room where Avion was controlling all armors, and now he has gone somewhere. She quickly uses her mind and deactivates the Rhodes armor. She checks Tony is working fine, must means he has found an element that is preventing his death. Here, Pepper seems to be listening to their conversation and learns Tony was going to die and hide all these things from her. They argue on this matter, so Rushman asks them to stay quiet and focus on whatever is going on here. Now Rhodes is free of control. He can stand on his own and can help his bro Tony. Those little armors approach them in a group and attack them. However, they both destroy every armor with their powers. It's not the end yet. The big boss Avion also pops up in his armor, far bigger than those little ones. They both engage in a fight with him and use their power discharge from their hands to cause a blast there. It damages the lame armor of Avion. However, he has installed a ticking bomb on every armor. Tony quickly rushes to the site where Pepper is and saves her from the blasts of remaining armor. On the building, they confess their love for each other with a kiss, but this guy Rhodes interrupts them. He has been in the building before them and listened to their stuff. He flies back to the air and gives them time alone. Later, that Fury guy takes Tony into his hideout and shows him a Project Avenger initiative is launching. According to Rushman's report, Iron Man is qualified for its recruitment, but not Tony for several reasons. That's why Fury wants Tony as a consultant. Tony also cannot object to Fury realizing he is not fit for recruitment, and in exchange requests Fury to assign someone as a presenter for the award ceremony. At the end, the Senator presents honorary awards to Rhodes and Tony in the award ceremony. Thor, 2011. Thor begins in the starry night sky with a van in the middle of nowhere where Jane Fosters, an astrophysicist, installs a device to look for something in the sky. Eric Selvig advises her to stop doing this, but she is stubborn because she thinks there is a connection between the atmospheric disturbances and her research. Darcy Lewis notices something in the side mirror and tells the others about it. As it is far from a subtle aurora, Jane films the whole thing as they chase the strange phenomenon. However, a sudden impact makes Darcy think she will not die for 6 college credits, but Jane refuses to back down. During their hustling, they knock out someone. They rush to look but have no idea where the man came from. Tunsberg, Norway, 965 AD. Odin narrates that mankind accepted that they were not alone in the universe. From the realm of cold and darkness came the frost giants, threatening to plunge the mortal world into a new ice age. But humanity did not face this threat alone, and Odin came with his army to battle. Odin's army drove the monsters away, but the cost was great. In the end, their king fell, and the source of their power was taken from them. When the battle ended, Odin returned home with his army to Realm Eternal, Asgard. Now they have turned into man's myths and legends, but it was Asgard and its warriors that brought peace in the universe. Odin converses with his 2 sons that the day will come when one of them will have to defend that peace. Thor is determined to hunt the monsters like his father when he becomes the king. This is when Odin says his famous line, "A wise king never seeks out war, but he must always be ready for it." We catch a glimpse of a hammer when the kid runs up to their father to tell him that they are ready, but Odin tells them only one of them can ascend the throne and both of them were born to be kings. Amidst the cheers of the crowd, Thor proudly walks up to Odin and bows before him, while teasingly winking at his mother, Frigga. Odin stands up, which silences the masses and calls Thor his heir and his firstborn, which leaves a bad taste in Loki's mouth. Odin continues to say that Thor is entrusted with the mighty hammer Mjolnir, forged in the heart of a dying star, a fit companion for a king. During his speech, right below the venue, 2 guards inspect various treasures, but something is lurking in the darkness. On the other side, Thor swears his oath and Odin is about to proclaim him the king, but then stops. Underground, the guards inspect the frosting floor, but are attacked by frost giants and Odin can feel their presence. The frost giants steal the casket of ancient winters, but Odin hits his staff on the ground to release the destroyer that annihilates the monsters. Odin then enters the treasury in 2 with Thor and Loki, and the hidden guard returns to his place. Odin reveals that he has a truce with Laufey, king of Jotuns, so all is well, but Thor thinks they should march into Jotunheim and teach them a lesson. Odin reminds him that Thor is not the king of Asgard yet, and he has yet to make this decision. Thor is furious and Loki fans the flames, saying that Thor is right about everything. Thor decides to visit Jotunheim himself, despite the opposition from Warriors 3, but he convinces them anyway. The gang travels the Bifrost Bridge, but is stopped by Heimdall. Loki tries to handle the situation, but Thor has a more direct way of asking. Heimdall wants to know how the enemy slipped his watch, so he lets them pass with no resistance. Heimdall activates the Bifrost Bridge, but warns them if their return poses a threat to Asgard, the bridge will stay closed for them. With the speed of light, they arrive on the cold lands of Jotunheim and start walking. No one comes into sight for some time, but then Laufey claims they have come a long way to die. Thor demands how they entered Asgard, so Laufey reveals that the House of Odin is full of traitors. This angers Thor and he acts cocky as always, but Laufey is on home turf. Loki tries to calm his brother, but Thor does not listen. Loki offers a chance to turn back, so Loki accepts it, but just as Thor turns back, Loki provokes him, saying, "Run back home, little princess." Thor smiles and slams Loki onto his throne using his hammer, which embarks a fight. A monster touches Loki during the fight, but surprisingly, he also turns blue like the frost giants. Fandral gets hurt, so Loki tells Thor to return, but Thor is not ready to go back yet. Loki defrosts a giant monster at last, making Asgardians run for their lives, but Thor summons thunder and shatters the lands of Jotunheim. The Asgardians ask Heimdall to open the bridge, but the giant stands before them, which falls when Thor passes right through it. Asgardians now face the massive army of Jotunheim, but Odin arrives using the Bifrost and shuts Thor up before asking Loki to end the war. Loki claims they are beyond diplomacy, but Odin strikes a single blow before retreating with Thor and his companions. Back at Asgard, Odin and Thor argue back and forth. Odin admits his mistake of thinking Thor was ready and deems him unworthy as he takes his power and casts him out. Odin makes it so that only the worthy one who holds the hammer shall possess the power of Thor before throwing it into the Bifrost as well. Thor falls from Asgard to Earth and is knocked out by Jane's vehicle. Thor gets up to look for his hammer, but it does not heed his command. Jane observes the strange patterns on the ground, but Eric thinks they need to take the guy to the hospital. Jane thinks he is fine, but after hearing him talking to the sky, Jane agrees with Eric. Thor asks about the realm they are in and is taser gunned in return. They put him in the car and leave while the hammer falls like a shooting star far away. At the hospital, Thor attacks the medical staff before he is put to sleep once again. On the other hand, the hammer is found by someone in a red car who cannot manage to retrieve it. Jane continues her research and links the strange phenomenon to the Einstein-Rosen bridge, which is a wormhole in short. They also discover a photo of a man standing inside the wormhole, which earns Jane a visit to the hospital. Thor finds himself strapped and finds a way to set himself free, so Jane comes to find only an empty bed. She sets out to find Thor but knocks him out yet again. On the other hand, the Mjolnir has become a picnic point with men coming to try lifting it until the officials arrive at the location. Thor washes up at Jane's lab but walks around like he owns the place. Back at Asgard, Thor's friends worry for him while Loki reveals that he told the guard to tell Odin everything after they left and claims he never thought Thor would be banished. He thinks Asgard does not need a reckless king, but Sif knows he has always been jealous of Thor. Hogun reminds them what Loki said about being traitors in the House of Odin, and that a master of magic can bring 3 Jotuns into Asgard, but Fandral rejects the idea of Loki being involved. Loki carries the casket of ancient winters, but is stopped by Odin. Loki turns blue and asks about his identity, so Odin reveals that he found an abandoned baby in the aftermath of battle, Loki's son. Loki asks him the purpose of taking an enemy's blood, so Odin tells him his dream of an alliance and bringing peace through him. Loki thinks of himself as a stolen relic, locked up until Odin finds a use for him. Loki shouts at Odin until he falls and loses consciousness, urging Loki to call for guards. Thor keeps on stuffy food and drinks, asking for another in his unique way, which earns him a scolding from Jane. Some newcomers in the shop start talking about a satellite crashing in the vicinity. Thor hears them say nobody could lift it, so he asks the way and receives his answer with a kind warning that the army was there when they left. Jane chases after him, so Thor offers to tell her everything if she does take him there. Despite her excitement, she has to refuse him because Eric does not want her to get involved with the delusional guy. After a short farewell, Jane returns to her lab to find her stuff being taken away by S.H.I.E.L.D. She tries resisting but to no avail, so they sit idle on the rooftop of the said lab, mourning their years of research. Eric suggests emailing his colleague who has had some previous dealings with S.H.I.E.L.D., but Darcy informs him they took his laptop as well. Warriors 3 and Sif arrive to talk to Odin, but Loki sits on the throne and reveals that Odin has fallen into the Odin sleep, and Frigga refuses to leave his side. The 4 Asgardians reluctantly bow before him and ask to end Thor's banishment, but Loki refuses. Eric picks up a book that contains the fairy tales of Thor and scoffs while Thor enters a pet store demanding a horse. Thankfully, Jane's here to give him a lift. On the way, Jane and Thor engage in a light conversation, and he reveals that what she seeks is a rainbow bridge, making Jane hope he is not wrong. Odin is on his bed in Odin sleep when Frigga tells Loki not to lose hope in Odin and Thor, as Odin always has a purpose for what he does. Jane and Thor arrive at the hammer's location, which has turned into a massive lab. Thor wraps his jacket around Jane and leaves to retrieve his Mjolnir. The hammer causes interferences with the signals, but they still find a security breach in the west fence. Thor takes care of the guys coming to check the area, which causes unrest in the whole facility. Jane leaves a voice message for Eric to come find her near the crater if she does not reply in the next few hours. Thor keeps making his way to Mjolnir while fighting the humans, fights the big guy in mud, and finally reaches it but cannot lift it. Taken into custody by the authorities. Jane and Eric argue about saving Thor when Darcy finds Mjolnir in a book, but Eric thinks it is a children's fairy tale. Darcy sides with Jane, leaving Eric speechless. In captivity, Thor is bombarded with questions by Phil Coulson, but he remains silent. Once the man leaves, Loki appears before him with the news that Odin is dead, blaming it all on Thor's banishment and the threat of a new war. Thor wants to return home, but Loki claims that even Frigga has forbidden his return. After a brief farewell, Loki takes his leave to try lifting Mjolnir, but is unable to do so. Eric makes up a bundle to lie to get Thor out of custody, who steals a packet on his way out while Phil orders his men to follow them. At a bar, Thor and Eric have a conversation about Jane, where Thor agrees to leave the town in the morning for Jane's sake. Loki arrives at Jotunheim once again to meet Loki, and it is revealed that he was the one who aided Jotuns into the Asgard. Loki plans to help Loki into Odin's chamber to slay him and take the casket. Loki returns to Asgard but is faced by Heimdall, who knows Loki can conceal himself and the others, but has an oath to obey the king of Asgard. Loki orders him to close the Bifrost for anyone. Thor takes a drunk Eric back to Jane's van, and after an awkward situation, he returns Jane's notebook that he stole from the authorities. Thor explains the 9 realms that are linked to each other through the branches of Yggdrasil and Asgard. Thor's friends are frustrated as they know they need to find Thor even if it is treason. The main problem is Heimdall, who watches everything, but he calls for them and leaves the bridge to them without any resistance. Loki watches from a distance as the Warriors 3 and Sif leave for Earth. The Asgardians arrive at Earth, but S.H.I.E.L.D. picks up the signal and goes to investigate. Thor helps Jane prepare breakfast, oblivious to the fact that he is being observed. Loki orders the destroyer Automaton to destroy everything to make sure Thor does not return. On the other hand, Thor's friends start looking for him despite being the center of attention thanks to their clothes. They are finally able to find him and introduce themselves to Jane and the others. Thor refuses to go back because his father died because of him, but Sif tells him Odin still lives. Loki faces Heimdall as he reveals the truth that Bifrost is not the only way to get in and out of this realm, and banishes him from Asgard. But Heimdall refuses to obey him, so Loki freezes him using the casket. S.H.I.E.L.D. investigates the area, but a sudden storm catches everyone's attention, which summons the destroyer. S.H.I.E.L.D. assumes it belongs to Stark, but the thing starts attacking them. Warriors 3 and Sif decide to fight while the other proceed to empty the area. But even the Asgardians are no match for the destroyer and fall back while Thor approaches the destroyer alone and apologizes to Loki, who can hear him. Thor tells him to take his life instead of innocent humans, so the destroyer punches him to end everything. Thor loses consciousness in Jane's arm and the destroyer turns back. Odin's tears fall in his Odin sleep, and S.H.I.E.L.D. picks up strange interference from the hammer. Odin's words to hammer make it vibrate and fly towards Thor. Seeing the strange object in the air, Eric pulls Jane back and the hammer falls into Thor's hand with a loud thunder. Thor transforms back to his former glory, leaving everyone awestruck. The destroyer tries to attack again, but Thor destroys it easily. Thor decides to go to the Bifrost site, but Phil from S.H.I.E.L.D. arrives at the scene, so Thor explains they are on the same side of protecting Earth, and they can become allies if he returns Jane's things. Phil agrees, so Thor takes Jane to see the bridge she has been researching. Loki opens up a portal for Loki and his Jotuns and takes them into Asgard while Heimdall's ice cracks a bit. At the Bifrost site, Thor calls for Heimdall, so he cracks open and opens the Bifrost for them. After a brief farewell to Jane, Thor and his companions return to Asgard. Loki enters Odin's chambers where Frigga tries to stop him but fails. Loki is about to end Odin, but Loki attacks him to gain points in front of Frigga. Thor returns but is attacked by Loki, who then proceeds to destroy Jotunheim to prove himself worthy of the throne of Asgard. Thor opposes the destruction of an entire race, so the two start fighting and end up on the Bifrost where Loki is about to fall off, but Thor tries to save him, for it to only be an illusion. Loki tries to attack, but Thor subdues him with a single attack and places his hammer on top of him. Having no other way, Thor proceeds to destroy Bifrost to stop the destruction of Jotunheim, which wakes Odin from Odin's sleep. The impact of the destruction of Bifrost causes Thor and Loki to fall off, but Odin comes to save them. Once Loki finds that Odin does not approve of his ways, he lets go and falls into space. On Earth, the sky clears up and Jane realizes that the bridge is gone. The Asgardians throw a feast, but Thor mourns for the loss of his brother and misses Jane. He knows he has much to learn, but his father is already proud of him. Heimdall watches over the broken bridge, saying there is still hope. He can see that Jane is still searching for Thor, and that is enough hope for Thor. Captain America, the First Avenger, 2011. The movie kicks off with a truck being stopped in a snowy area. The guys are from Washington and have come to get some difficult jobs done, but soon realize they will need more than just a crane, because before them is a massive plane buried inside the snow. Two men manage to get inside the vessel and find something that makes them call the colonel at 3 in the morning. In Tønsberg, Norway, in March 1942, a man seeks refuge in a building, but the army destroys the gate, leaving him dead. Men start opening a casket, but Johann Schmidt stops them as he starts talking to the old man about a legend that the old man is trying to conceal. Johann Schmidt opens the casket to find Tesseract, the jewel of Odin's treasure room, but it easily shatters. Schmidt threatens the old man, finds what he is looking for in an old drawing, and fires him. Steve Rogers, a young boy, tries to get recruited into the army but gets rejected due to medical reasons. He goes to watch a movie, but they play a tribute to soldiers fighting the war. The loud jerk wants the movie to start already, but Steve speaks up and gets beaten up in the back alley in return. Luckily, Sergeant Jake Barnes comes to his rescue, who is shipping out to England the next day. So he takes Steve out with him to an exhibition where Howard Stark presents his idea of flying vehicles. But Steve escapes out of there to once again go to the recruitment center, which earns him a little argument with Bucky, while Dr. Abraham Erskine watches from the sidelines. In the end, they make up and part ways. Steve tries his luck at the recruitment center once again, but the physician leaves, making him agitated about his false information. Dr. Abraham enters the room and claims to be a member of the Strategic Scientific Reserve, or SSR for short, and is interested in Steve's 5 tries in Army recruitment and asks for his reason for doing so. Steve tells him, "I do not like bullies. I do not care where they are from." Dr. Abraham decides to give him a chance. In a mountain range, Dr. Zola and Johann Schmidt experiment on Tesseract to use its energy and succeed in harvesting it. Agent Carter greets the recruits, but a soldier disrespects her, so she punches him in the face. Colonel Phillips joins in to give his speech, but Steve catches his attention. The training starts, but as expected, the young Steve does not do well. But then comes taking off the flag challenge, and Steve uses his wits to take the flag easily, earning a ride with Agent Carter. Dr. Abraham plans to pick Steve for the Super Soldier program, but Colonel Phillips opposes the idea. He throws a grenade as a test, so everyone runs away except Steve, who throws himself on it. Turns out it was a dummy grenade, and Steve proved himself, but Colonel Phillips thinks he is still too skinny to be selected. Dr. Abraham pays Steve a visit at night and tells him about his past when Hitler believed Abraham would make them strong. So he sent the head of Hydra, Johann Schmidt, who believes in myths of the great power of gods, experiment on himself to become stronger. But the side effects of the serum are adverse, as it amplifies what is inside the man. The bad becomes worse, but the good becomes great. This is why Steve is chosen, because a strong man may lose respect for the power, but a weak man knows the value of strength. Johann Schmidt finds the whereabouts of Dr. Abraham because his serum is the only defense against the power they possess. Steve travels with Agent Carter as they talk about idle stuff until they reach an antique store. The antique store is a hidden base where the experiment is going to be done. Dr. Abraham explains that the serum infusion will induce immediate cellular change, and the subject will be saturated with Vita rays to stimulate growth. Steve is encapsulated after the infusion to saturate him in Vita rays. He shouts during the procedure, but claims to be able to stand the pain. Once the capsule opens, a man-up Steve gets out in one piece, so everyone gathers around him. Dr. Abraham notices Heinz Kruger, a Hydra agent, pull the trigger to cause a blast and steal the serum, and make an escape after shooting Dr. Abraham. The doctor dies in Steve's arms while Heinz Kruger makes his escape. Steve chases him with his new strength, but Kruger uses a child as a hostage, throws him in the water, and escapes using his vessel. The boy can swim, so Steve chases after Kruger underwater and is able to catch him, but he chooses to die. Johann Schmidt is pressured by officers for the results, so he decides to show them what he has achieved. He claims to have harnessed the power of gods, so he no longer needs to obey Hitler. But the others do not believe him, so he demonstrates the weapon on them, annihilating them completely. Steve gives blood samples because any hope of reproducing the program is locked in his genetic code without Dr. Abraham. Howard Stark briefs to Colonel Phillips that he has no idea how the machine works, despite being the best mechanical engineer in the country. But Hydra contains the technology, so SSR is taking the fight to Hydra. Steve wants to join, but Colonel Phillips orders him to go to Alamogordo as a lab subject. Senator Brandt does not agree with the colonel, so he promotes Steve. However, they put Steve in a suit and have him perform musicals to make him a star overnight. The audiences love him, but when he delivers the speech to the frontier soldiers, it does not go well. He feels dejected, but Agent Carter comes for a visit and informs him about the operation against Schmidt, and his audience is what's left of the 107th. Steve demands the casualty list from Colonel Phillips, as he wants to know about Sergeant James Barnes from the 107th. The colonel tells him the name sounds familiar, as he has signed many condolence letters today. Steve asks about their next plans, but Phillips taunts him about his performances. Steve reads the maps and leaves, but Agent Carter can guess his intentions, so she tries to infuse some sense into him. But when he does not listen, she joins him on the plane with Stark. On the way, they talk about Hydra's layout, and Agent Carter gives him a transponder to contact them as soon as he is done. But the plane gets attacked, so Steve jumps off it while the plane turns around. At Hydra Base, the production of Valkyrie progresses as scheduled, but Johann Schmidt wants the production to be increased by 60%, even if it means draining the prisoners of all their energy. Steve infiltrates one of their trucks and takes care of the men inside it. Once inside the camp, he makes his way discreetly, steals a sample, and frees the prisoners. He asks for James Barnes and gets informed about the isolation ward from where nobody returns. He leaves for that while the imprisoned soldiers start fighting in the camp using Hydra's weapons. Schmidt watches everything, notices Steve, and starts pushing buttons, but Dr. Zola runs away after seeing this. Schmidt takes Tesseract while Dr. Zola starts packing up his papers. Steve watches him flee and finds Bucky in his lab, along with the map of their other Hydra bases. The other soldiers succeed in getting to the gates, but the whole place starts blowing up. Steve and Bucky come face to face with Schmidt, who is impressed by the development of Dr. Abraham's project. Schmidt reveals what he has become and escapes, leaving Steve and Bucky behind. Red Skull makes his escape using the plane, leaving even Dr. Zola behind with the keys to his vehicle. On the other hand, Steve and Bucky also try to escape the blowing building, but things are not looking well. Colonel Phillips reports that Steve is no longer alive due to no sign of activity in the vicinity. He cannot question Stark because he is rich and the best engineer, so he blames Agent Carter, but she does not regret her decisions. Shortly after, Steve and Bucky return to the army camp with other soldiers. They start calling him Captain America and appreciate him for the first time. Captain America is due to receive a medal for valor, but he does not show up. At the base, Steve marks all the locations he saw of Hydra bases on the map, but the main Hydra base is not included. Steve is given the role of taking out Hydra, so he convinces some of the best soldiers to join, including Bucky. Agent Carter arrives at the bar in a red dress and gains all the attention, but she is just there to tell Steve about his meeting with Stark the next morning. Stark observes the material Steve brought back, but it causes an explosion. Steve meets Lorraine when he goes to see Stark, who is the most impressed by him and the lives he has saved, but Agent Carter catches them red-handed. When Steve tries to explain himself, he brings out Carter and Stark's relationship, but this puts Carter in a worse mood. Later, Stark explains nothing is going on between them and gives him some high-tech equipment, but Steve likes a shield made of vibranium that saves him from Carter's anger. Once ready, Captain America and his team destroy Hydra's base, so that when Red Skull arrives, all he sees is wreckage. The team takes out one base after the other, which makes Red Skull boil with fury. Captain America and his team now arrive in the snowy mountains to catch a Hydra train with Dr. Zola inside. Steve and Bucky successfully infiltrate the train, but get attacked by the enemy. After an extended crossfire, they succeeded in taking out the guards, but Bucky falls off the train. Steve mourns his loss while the other members take in Dr. Zola. After he is taken into custody, Colonel Phillips gets him some food, but when Dr. Zola refuses to eat meat, Phillips starts eating it himself as he presents his theory that Dr. Zola does not have a pill in his mouth to take his life because he wants to live. Colonel Phillips even sent a message to authorities that Dr. Zola provided valuable information, so he is reprimanded to Switzerland. Zola believes Schmidt could tell this is a lie, but Phillips reminds him he is just a liability. But Zola still believes in Schmidt because he walks in the footsteps of the gods and can achieve what he desires. Red Skull gets ready with his army in Valkyrie as he gives his speech about dominating the world. Agent Carter finds Steve drinking in an abandoned building, but he cannot get drunk because his metabolism is 4 times faster than normal. She consoles him for his loss of a friend and promises to stand with him when he plans to put an end to Hydra. In the meeting, Colonel Phillips and others discuss Hydra's power, and they have less than 24 hours to act. They know the location of Hydra's main base, so Steve decides to fight them head first. Captain America is again on a mission, but gets pursued by the enemy. After taking care of them, he enters through the main gate and fights single-handedly until he is surrounded. He is taken in front of the Red Skull, where he is beaten up until his team arrives through the windows. Red Skull makes his escape, but Steve chases after him. The team alerts Colonel Phillips, who charges forward with his soldiers. Steve chases after the Red Skull but is ambushed by a fire soldier. Luckily, Agent Carter takes care of him so Steve can go after the Red Skull. He reaches Valkyrie and rides the vehicle while Steve joins Colonel Phillips and Agent Carter in pursuit and successfully grabs onto Valkyrie. Once inside, he notices the small planes with various city names on top, and soon, the Hydra soldiers come to ride them. After fighting them and trying to stop them, he ends up on a plane which he crashes into Valkyrie. Inside once again, Steve makes his way to the operation room and starts fighting the Red Skull. Amid their fighting, the Tesseract gets knocked out of its compartment and starts reacting to everything around it, which causes the Red Skull to be absorbed into the Tesseract and then falls off Valkyrie. Steve contacts the base to tell them about the situation and decides to put it into the water to save lives. After setting a date with Steve, Agent Carter loses contact with him. Valkyrie crash lands into the ice and submerges into the water. With the war won, everyone celebrates, but his friends remember him. Stark retrieves the Tesseract from underwater, but still keeps looking for Valkyrie. Colonel Phillips silently leaves Steve's classified file in Agent Carter's hands, while Captain America is remembered by the masses. Steve Rogers wakes up to a distant sound and gets up to realize it's the sound of the radio. Amanda Rigetti, a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, comes to greet him and informs him that he is in a recovery room in New York City. Steve asks once again because the game broadcasting on the radio is from 1941, and he was a part of it. The agent gets scared when Steve approaches him, so she calls in backup, but Steve breaks the wall along with the soldiers and escapes while Amanda calls for Code 13. Causing all the agents in the building to chase Steve, Steve gets out of the building, but the world around him is completely different. He is surrounded by vehicles in seconds, and Nick Fury appears at the scene and explains they plan to reveal to him slowly that he has been asleep for almost 70 years. Steve feels surprised to hear that, but the worst part of all is that he had a date to appear at. The Avengers, 2012. The movie starts off with the news that the Tesseract has awakened. The Dark Forces know it is on a small human planet, but their ally knows it's working, as they never will. He is ready to lead their forces, their Chitauri. The one to lead will take the world. The universe will belong to the Dark Forces while the humans will just burn. All the agents have been called in for duty because the evacuation order has been confirmed. Agent Hill and Nick Fury land off a helicopter, and Phil Coulson reports that they still do not know the whole situation. Once inside the station, he reports that Dr. Selvig read an energy surge from the Tesseract 4 hours ago, and when he could not shut it down, they ordered the evacuation. Agent Hill provides that evacuation may be futile because if they cannot control Tesseract, there will not be a minimum safe distance. Nick Fury orders her to ship out Phase 2 prototypes. Nick Fury talks to Dr. Selvig, who explains that the Tesseract is misbehaving, as she is an energy source and cannot be turned off. Their harness calculations are far from complete, while she is throwing off gamma radiation. Nick Fury calls for the Hawk, who has been keeping an eye on everyone, but there has been no interference from this end. The cube is a doorway to the other end of space, and the door opens from both sides. The Tesseract starts acting recklessly, causing rumbling and opening a portal through a beam. Someone appears through it, so the arms are alert, but the screen reveals it to be Loki. Nick Fury orders him to drop the spear, but Loki starts attacking them. After destroying the whole lab, Loki comes face to face with the Hawk, but uses his pencils to make him behave. Nick Fury places the Tesseract in a case and proceeds to leave, but Loki stops him because he needs the Tesseract. Loki introduces himself from Asgard, and Dr. Selvig recognizes him as the brother of Thor. Loki decides to ignore him as he delivers his speech about freedom being a lie. Hawk, still under the spell, tells Loki that this place is about to blow, while Dr. Selvig, also under the spell now, informs that the portal is going to close in on itself in 2 minutes. Hawk shoots Nick Fury, takes the Tesseract, and leaves with Loki and the others. They meet Agent Hill near the vehicles, who starts chasing them after getting the info that Hawk is turned and has the Tesseract. The place starts rumbling, so everyone evacuates while Agent Hill is stuck in a tug with the Hawk. Nick Fury watches the whole place blow up from the helicopter as Agent Hill gets stuck under the rubble. Nick Fury pursues Loki and others, but Loki destroys the helicopter and escapes. Nick Fury contacts Coulson and Hill to get them to have every living soul look for that briefcase, because they are at war as of now. Somewhere in Russia, Natasha Romanoff is tied up and beaten because they know her identity as the Black Widow. They are about to torture her further, but receive a phone call for Natasha. After getting threatened, the mob boss lets Natasha talk on the phone. Coulson asks for her to come in and that the Hawk has been compromised. She puts Coulson on hold, taking care of the mobs, and talks to Coulson once again. He tells him to get the big guy as he got Stark on board. Somewhere in India, a little girl runs into a house to ask for a doctor for her father in desperation. Robert Bruce Banner follows to help her, but finds she is paid to lure him in. Natasha appears from the shadows, making Bruce believe she is here to eliminate him, but she reveals that she is here on behalf of S.H.I.E.L.D. Bruce does not want to come along, so Natasha explains about Tesseract's potential to destroy the planet, its disappearance, and the emission of gamma rays. As no one knows more about gamma rays than Bruce, they want him on the case. However, Bruce gets angry and scares Natasha, revealing that she has a whole squad with her. Nick Fury tries to explain to the councilman that Loki is declaring war on them, but they want him to focus on Phase 2 because the Avengers initiative was shut down. Nick Fury wants the Avengers to become a response team, but the councilmen do not seem persuaded. Steve Rogers is training while thinking of his past when Nick Fury approaches him and tells about Hydra's secret weapon, the Tesseract, which could be the key to unlimited sustainable energy. He tells Steve about Loki, but Steve thinks they should have left the Tesseract in the ocean. Iron Man installs a device underwater and explains to Pepper that the Stark Tower is about to become a beacon of self-sustaining clean energy. They light up the tower and plan to do the same for the next 3. Once Iron Man lands, Jarvis informs him about Agent Coulson being on the line, but Stark refuses to answer because he has got a date. In the middle of flirting with Pepper, Stark is once again reminded of the telephone because Jarvis's protocols are being overridden. Coulson finally connects to the line, but when Stark refuses to answer, Coulson makes his way inside and hands him the case file. Stark still feels the burns for not being chosen in the Avengers initiative, but gets serious once he watches everything. Steve asks if Bruce was trying to replicate the serum they used on him, and is informed that Bruce thought gamma rays were the key to unlocking Dr. Abraham's formula, but it did not go well. Loki watches his men working in the lab, but his allies, the Chitauri, want instant results. Loki refuses to hand over the Tesseract until their force is to his command, but the Chitauri threaten him instead. Steve meets Natasha on an aircraft where they regroup with Bruce for a brief introduction before the carrier transforms into a helicarrier, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s command center that blends in the air on Fury's commands. Nick Fury greets his gathered heroes before getting the update that they are connected to every wirelessly operated camera on the planet. But that is still not enough to find the enemy, so Bruce asks them to have every lab place their spectrometers on rooftops so he can detect the gamma rays. On the other side, Loki's men proceed with their progress under the spell because the Tesseract has shown them what they desire, but they need iridium for their mission. S.H.I.E.L.D. finds a match of Loki, so Steve is given the mission. Hawk infiltrates the building but needs a passcode to reach his destination. Loki nonchalantly enters a party and attacks a man in the eye using a device that recreates the retina on the Hawk side, enabling him to enter. Hawk gets the iridium while Loki terrorizes the people until Captain America arrives with Natasha to fight him. Iron Man also joins in to take Loki into custody. Steve does not like how submissive Loki is acting, but Stark acts cocky as always. The lightning starts thundering while Thor drops on top of the plane. Iron Man opens up the door, but Thor punches him and takes Loki with him. Iron Man follows pursuit despite Steve's opposition because they cannot let the only key to Tesseract get away. Natasha warns Captain America, but he still jumps off the plane in pursuit. Thor asks Loki about the Tesseract, but Loki is still stingy about the past and plans to conquer the world with the power of the Tesseract. Thor wants him to return to Asgard, but when Loki refuses, he is about to attack but gets knocked out by Iron Man. Both fight using words and fists until Captain America arrives to form a truce. Thor attacks Captain America, but his vibranium shield recoils the attack that causes the three to calm down. Loki is taken to the helicarrier where he eyes Bruce before being locked up in a cell. Nick Fury explains to him that he cannot escape, but Loki knows the cell is built for a mindless beast and thinks Nick is so desperate to obtain Tesseract that he is even using such a beast as defense. Thor explains Loki has an army called Chitauri who will help him conquer the Earth in return for the Tesseract. Bruce connects Loki is building a portal for his army and needs Eric Selvig for this purpose. Thor recognizes the name, so Natasha informs him Loki has Selvig under spell. They do not know why they need iridium, but Stark provides it as a stabilizing agent so the portal won't collapse on itself and Loki can open the portal as wide as he wants for as long as he wants. Stark bugs the place while explaining that they need Tesseract as a sustainable energy source. Bruce gives his own theory on what Loki might need, impressing Stark, but he rubs salt on a sour spot. Nick Fury joins to ask Stark to team up with Bruce to find the cube. While working, Stark invites Bruce to Stark Tower, but when he refuses, Stark nips him to get a reaction, but there's no reaction. Steve does not like his ways, but Stark thinks Nick Fury is hiding something. Bruce also thinks the same because S.H.I.E.L.D. did not get Stark on the Tesseract project despite his achievements in sustainable energy development. Stark has plans to look into S.H.I.E.L.D. once Jarvis breaches the system. Steve still thinks they should follow orders due to the impending war over them, but the other two think it smells a bit funky. Steve leaves the room, leaving Stark and Bruce to talk about controlling their powers, but Bruce does not think Hulk can be controlled. Steve sneaks into a room in search of answers. Dr. Selvig takes the piece of iridium and places it inside a device. Coulson informs Thor that they moved Jane to a safe location as soon as Loki took Dr. Selvig. Thor thinks Loki has put the Earth in danger twice now. And all because of him, but Nick Fury reminds him the war has not yet started. Loki is quite impressed by the way Natasha sneaked up on him, but he expected her to come as a balm after Nick Fury concocted torture. Natasha only wants to know about Hawk because she owes him a debt. Loki likes that she is bargaining for one man when her world is on balance, because he knows all her secrets that she cannot wipe out by saving a single man. Loki's end of the bargain is to let Hawk destroy her slowly and open up his skull after that. Natasha calls him a monster, but Loki says she is the one who brought the monster. Just from this exchange, she finds out Loki means to unleash the Hulk. Nick Fury questions Stark on his progress to finding Tesseract, but he has already done his work. Stark questions about Phase 2, but Steve is the one to reveal that Phase 2 is using the Tesseract to make weapons. Nick Fury explains they are making the weapons because of Thor because they learned that humans are no match for the other species out there. This causes arguments among all of them regarding their different views, while Hawk prepares for the battle with his men. Steve and Stark continue their argument while Nick Fury asks Bruce to return, but he is stingy about the cell they made for him. Bruce reveals they cannot annihilate him because he has already tried that, but the big guy spits out the bullet. He gets so agitated that he unconsciously grabs Loki's scepter. The systems detect the Tesseract, but Hawk's arrow blows up the helicarrier's engine, so Nick Fury assigns Stark to fix those engines. Hawk infiltrates the helicarrier with his men while Natasha tries to calm Bruce down, but Hulk still comes out and starts attacking her. Steve and Stark work together to get the engines back on, while Natasha runs for her life until Thor comes to fight the Hulk. The enemy infiltrates the operation room where Nick Fury and Agent Hill try subduing them and get the info about Hulk. They get a jet to fire at them, but Hulk shreds the thing apart. Hawk uses his arrow to shut down the engine entirely, causing the helicarrier to descend uncontrollably. Iron Man starts rotating the turbines and Natasha decides to go after Hawk himself. Loki leaves his cell, and trapping Thor inside while Natasha and Hawk engage in a fight. Thor tries to hammer the cell, but Coulson comes to help only to get stabbed by Loki, who throws the cell down. On the other hand, Natasha manages to beat Hawk while Thor crashes on the ground. Much to Loki's pleasure, who gets shot by a dying Coulson. Iron Man manages to rotate the turbines that stabilize the helicarrier, but Loki escapes. Agent Coulson dies, leaving everyone with sorrow. Nick Fury tells them about the Avengers initiative because Coulson believed in such an idea. Thor survives the crash but cannot summon his hammer while Bruce also wakes up in a construction site. Hawk returns to his senses through cognitive recalibration but finds that Natasha has been compromised as she got red in her ledger. Stark thinks that Loki likes attention because he is a full-tilt diva, and just as he expected, Dr. Selvig is found on top of the Stark Tower. Everyone preps for the next battle and leave the helicarrier. Iron Man finds Dr. Selvig with Tesseract on the Stark Tower. He tries to shut it down, but there is a barrier of pure energy around the Tesseract. Loki also arrives at the tower and tries to cast his spell on Stark, but is not able to do so, so he throws him off the tower. Fortunately, the new suit gets deployed on time, but the portal opens up to make way for Chitauri to attack Earth. On the other hand, Loki and Thor fight while Natasha and Hawk try to join in but get blasted by Loki in crash land. A Chitauri ship arrives through the portal with more enemies, but the Triumph card is nowhere to be seen. Loki stabs Thor and joins Chitauri while the heroes fight them and try to get the civilians to safety, but there's no end to the enemy. They all regroup so Hulk takes care of the enemy ship, but more come through the portal so Captain America takes charge and orders each one what to do. All heroes play their part to fight the enemy, but realize it will not mean anything until the portals open. So Natasha rides the enemy vehicle to get to it. On the other hand, Nick Fury is pestered by the Council that wants to throw nuclear weapons to stop the invasion, so he simply ignores them. Hulk beats the crap out of Loki while Natasha reaches the Tesseract, where Dr. Selvig tells her he built a safety to cut the enemy's power source and the key is Loki's scepter. The enemy gets the upper hand in the prolonged battle, so the Council dispatches the bird to take matters into their own hands. Nick Fury tries to stop it, but when he cannot, he warns Stark about the missile. Natasha and Dr. Selvig use Loki's scepter to reach the Tesseract, but Stark tells them to wait because of the missile. He takes hold of the missile and takes it into the portal. The missile hits the Chitauri base, causing everything to shut down. They wait for Stark to return, but choose to close the portal after a while. Fortunately, Iron Man falls out at the last moment and Hulk catches him. They open up his suit to find his eyes closed, but Hulk's growl wakes him up. Loki wakes up to find the Avengers on his head, and that marks the end of war. Nick Fury informs the Council that the Tesseract is now beyond their reach, as he allowed Thor to return it to Asgard along with Loki. Meanwhile, the Avengers part ways once more, prepared to reunite only when the world calls upon them again. If you like this recap, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. It will help the channel a lot. Please let us know in the comments which movie or franchise you want to see next.